Hello, it's Monday, September 8th. Welcome to another edition of the Mituye News. Today we have a really cool show for you. As always, if you haven't gotten a chance yet, please check out the Substack, sign up, subscribe to that. That is really the heart of this endeavor. I hope you can take a look at it. I hope you find it useful and share it with your friends. Also, in terms of the video element, wherever you're watching this, like, subscribe, follow, do those things, and we'll be able to build a community. We'll keep being able to discuss the news in this way with some eye towards the underlying tensions and so on. Okay, we'll start today out in Nepal, where some interesting things have occurred. By interesting, I mean horrific. We see a protest devolve into a series of killings by police. Let's take a look at it. Let's take a look at it. In Nepal, we have 19 dead in Gen Z protests at corruption and social media ban. Before I get into my commentary, let's just take a brief look at the story. At least 19 people have been killed and dozens injured in Nepal after demonstrations against political corruption and a government social media ban led to clashes between protesters and security forces. Thousands heeded a call by demonstrators describing themselves as Generation Z to gather near the parliament building in Kathmandu over the decision to ban platforms including Facebook, X, and YouTube, as well as over wider dissatisfaction with the government. Let's see. Nepal's Minister for Communication, Suba, told the BBC police had to use force, which included water cannons, batons, and firing rubber bullets. Okay, there appears to be something live fired because rubber bullets can't kill 19 people. So my understanding is there were not only rubber bullets, but live rounds fired at the protesters here. As I watched some of the discourse on Twitter, it became increasingly apparent to me that those closer to the protest were suggesting that this was more about corruption than it was about the ban on social media flat out. As I read the news stories as they came out, they really hit on the social media dynamic of this, but it seems like it might be a little more complicated, that really it's both. Like the social media ban might have been the rallying cry, but the real underlying frustration is about government corruption and the inability of the government to behave in a way that the youth, especially the youth wing, find acceptable. That maybe is the underlying tension here. But that's what's perhaps most interesting about it from my angle, because I came at it from a social media ban angle, was that I'm of the opinion that governments can, even the most repressive governments, are going to have to come up off this position that they can control the internet. Between VPNs and like technological savvy, the level of repression you're going to have to unleash to really keep people away from parts of the internet, and by that keep them away from controversial information, keep them from voicing their opinions. We may be in an age where it's going to be increasingly difficult to truly create an environment of censorship as a kind of repressive and authoritarian government may like. So I think this is perhaps revealing of the end of an era. Like, there is no ability in the coming era for governments to control the internet the way they had hoped or the way that they wish they could. And the youth are just, I'm a millennial, you say I'm 32, but anyone that's tech savvy under the age of maybe 50, it would be very difficult to meaningfully keep us off of the internet. It's also, I think, ethically and normatively wrong to ban people from information. And I'm a free speech advocate, so I understand everywhere is not the United States, and I can't, kind of assert my leanings on them. But if I could, I would I would instill or promote free speech of sorts. A really robust protection of free speech, so not even of sorts. But that's what's going on in Nepal. As we see, there was live fires, there was a curfew. Apparently the protest got into a banned area, and that's when things really escalated. So we'll see what happens. They're going to obviously try to calm things down. This is not a sustainable level of disruption between this kind of protest, this youth wing, and the government. So it is in their best interest, to the government's best interest, to probably come to the table and figure out what can be done to satisfy the protesters and the government. But hopefully it leans heavily in favor of the protesters, as I think they're right. I imagine, I'm not, an expert in the government of Nepal. This type of frustration with corruption generally doesn't come from nowhere. The government unleashed live rounds on young protesters who were upset about corruption and a social media ban. This all strikes me as like, yeah, man, like Nepal got to get it together, as it were, in terms of the government. But I wanted to point that out. That was worth of note today. So we'll head to our next story, but that's what's going on out there in Nepal. Here we have some images throwing tear gas canisters back, protesters climbing barricades, and so on. All right, let's take a look at our next story. What we got going on? Oh, Supreme Court weighed in. The U.S. Supreme Court backs Trump on aggressive immigration raids. What do we have here? The U.S. Supreme Court again backed President Donald Trump's hardline immigration approach on Monday, letting agents proceed with Southern California raids targeting people for deportation based on their race or language in a ruling its liberal justices said makes Latinos fair game to be seized at any time. The court granted a Justice Department request to put on hold a judge's order that had barred agents from stopping or detaining people without reasonable suspicion that they are in the country illegally by relying on race or ethnicity, or if they speak Spanish or English with an accent, among other factors. California's Governor Gavin Newsom, a Democrat, denounced the court's actions in harsh terms. End quote. Trump's hand-picked Supreme Court majority just became the grand marshal for a parade of racial terror in Los Angeles. Newsom said, I don't know how he said it. I haven't seen the video, but it'd be forceful. Newsom said in a statement, alluding to the fact that Trump appointed 3 of the 6 conservative justices serving on the 9-member court. So here we have it. This battle about, can we use federal agents to enforce the immigration law in California has been at least concluded for the time being by the Supreme Court, who's saying, yeah, they can do that. They can go about kind of very loosely questioning people about their immigration status, or rather their citizenship status, and that we don't have to be concerned about protections regarding race and ethnicity and other things, that wouldn't count as enough to trigger suspicion. Like, hey, if you think they're suspicious, you can go get them, because that is the precedent from U.S. law. So that's what we have. It just recently came out. The 6-3 decision, it really does speak to that ideological divide between these 6 conservative justices and these liberal justices that went harshly the other way, and they seem to be staunch in their condemnation. Well, I think the fear, as Gavin Newsom gave rise to it, is that we're going to end up with every quote unquote brown person, but the Latino community being on guard, being constantly suspect to being stopped and harassed by not even local law enforcement, but military, like that. That's a really dangerous place to be, and that we don't want kind of this wide profile of people that can trigger such enforcement or such inquiry, right? Like, what you doing? Where you going? You show me your papers. And at this point, it was interesting. I saw somebody suggest it's hard not to suggest that people in California should walk around with government identification to suggest, no, I'm here, I have my papers, and that notion, I think, is terrifying to people because of the implications of a government being allowed to force people to have paperwork suggesting they're allowed just to exist in public, and that producing that paperwork could become a routine part of your day. When you walk out of the house, you are aware that the government today might ask you, harass you, stop you, and this is often rife for abuse, because once they have that authority, all law enforcement, all military agents aren't good actors Like, this could quickly turn into bullying. This could quickly turn into violence. This could quickly turn into the type of frustration that builds over time in a community that feels like they're being kind of ghettoized. They're being put in a kind of open air prison where they're constantly subject to questions, constraint, physical touch, maybe get against the wall, right? This kind of thing. But all of that said, so I'm very sympathetic to that case, and I agree. This is not a sustainable way to enforce federal immigration policy. I, however, put a lot of the blame at the actors in the Californian government, both at the state level and at the local level, like Los Angeles, that refuse to cooperate. Like, this to me seems like a escalation that need not have happened, right? That there's a way to kind of, there's so much concern about bending the knee or giving any grounds to the federal government because Trump was an evil dictator and fascist and so on, that the breakdown has come to a head where now we have to, but the government, the federal government, is of the mind that they have to kind of indiscriminately unleash the force necessary to get the situation under control. Because I think where people aren't on the same page, at least in my observation of the discourse, is it out of control or is it not? So I am of the mind that what's happened over several decades is totally out of control. Because I'm a believer in citizenship and borders and so on. So this situation in which we've allowed such a tremendous, they're talking tens of millions of people have come through without documentation. I don't think these people necessarily shouldn't be able to attain citizenship, but to just allow this to go on is absurd, right? Like this something has to be done. So I was in that place. With that in mind, I was hoping some type of cooperation could allow for this to happen in an orderly fashion. The tension and antagonism has left us in this place with the federal government, the president, the executive being like, all right, send them, just figure it out. Figure it out and figure it out urgently because it's a crisis. Okay, that won't work because it's not a reasonable solution. You can't ghettoize people in this way. You can't have them kind of subject to military enforcement all the time about their status. That won't work. At the same time, California and Los Angeles seem to be of the mind that nothing is going to happen. We're not participating in that. You're welcome here. This is a sanctuary. Okay, how do we get to a place? I'm left with no answers because this won't work. Also, the kind of, I'll say, democratic or progressive answer won't work for me either. No one's presenting me a kind of orderly path forward in which you are either given a pathway to citizenship in a kind of straightforward manner, if you can demonstrate, or at least a guest status, like you can demonstrate that you haven't done anything to require this type of enforcement besides violating a kind of orderly entry into the country. Or you return, like, okay, you need to go back. Like you can't just do what you want to do when you want to do it. I can't just like go to Nigeria and be like, I'm here now, y'all deal with it. That doesn't make sense to me. But yeah, that's what's going on. We have the Supreme Court making this decision. A lot of controversy around it, obviously, given the what feels indiscriminate power given to military enforcement of immigration law, and the backdrop, like as a black dude, as a black American that has seen stop and frisk, seen the LAPD in the 80s, seen not up close, but maybe from a historical vantage point, seeing what it means for law enforcement to just be like, get against the wall. What you doing? Where you going? Like that shit won't work. In part because of the level of frustration it breeds. Like that, not even the kind of fact of the possibility, but like it's going to create a sentiment, an environment in which people really begin to buck against authority. And you can't have that. This has to be cooperative. It's our government. It can't be us versus the government. That doesn't make any sense. Anyway, that's what's going on with the U.S. Supreme Court. They've decided that they've reversed the lower court decision. So this was declared illegal. This was applauded by the kind of progressives, the Democrats, like a host of anti-Trump actors, and a host of progressive and Democratic partisan actors. That was reversed. So that is an important element of the story as well, that there's been a switch. Some images, in case you're, this is a really cool picture. But yeah, that's what we got going on from the Supreme Court. What do we have next here? ICE, more ICE stuff. So yeah, it's getting real in the streets about the immigration situation has come to a head. Operation Patriot 2.0. Let's see. ICE launches new immigration enforcement surge in Massachusetts. What's going on? Federal immigration officials have launched a new surge of enforcement action in Massachusetts, the Department of Homeland Security confirmed Sunday. The department did not specify how long there would be increased ICE activity around the state. In May, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement said its agents arrested nearly 1,500 people as a part of a month-long crackdown, which they called Operation Patriot. The latest surge is being called Operation 2.0. Okay, so here we have it. I'll give us the quote here. Under President Trump and Secretary Noem, nowhere is a safe haven for criminal illegal aliens, a department spokesperson said in a statement. If you come to our country illegally and you break our laws, we will hunt you down, arrest you, deport you, and you will never return. Okay, so the government talking that tough, they talking that talk. Pam Bondi's coming out here like, look. I'm the captain now. If you are here illegally, you commit crimes, this is what's going to happen to you. We're going to find you. We're going to get you out of here. And you're never coming back. So get that through your skull. It's different now, right? This isn't Biden. This isn't Obama. Obama, I guess, was very heavy-handed with the immigration. I shouldn't say that. I should say this isn't Biden. This isn't neoliberal policy in which we want a permanent underclass of workers that we don't have to pay living wages and can exist in this kind of, I won't even call them second class citizenship. This like quasi citizen status is over. All that stuff is over. This isn't the past administration. There's something new happening here. Massachusetts obviously is rejecting this, or at least quite concerned about it. The Boston mayor, Michelle Wu, she's been quite staunch, much like Karen Bass, much like Brandon Johnson in Chicago. Karen Bass is in LA, like really, really staunch in that we don't cooperate with the federal government. That's not our responsibility. The residents of Boston don't want that. We are a sanctuary status. If you violate our mandates by the people, we'll take you to court. We're not going for it. Has been Michelle Wu's stance. So that's led to a lot of tension here. And again, I keep kind of returning to this point that perhaps certain level of cooperation would be best. Plenty of people do. I don't, and many others don't want to see military agents or even federal police enforcing immigration law. I don't think this is necessary. I could be wrong. I think many at the Trump administration wouldn't find this necessary if they didn't feel as though these leaders of smaller bodies of government weren't so dead set on essentially bucking federal law, that like they just were so adamant that they're not participating that it's causing confusion. I don't mean to justify the actions by saying you forced the hand of the federal government, but I do want to indicate that I think things could happen in a more orderly, sustainable fashion if particularly Democratic partisan actors weren't so committed to like grandstanding and kind of creating such a tense environment between the federal government and the smaller bodies of government. I don't think that's necessary. But anyway, that's what's going on in Massachusetts. Operation Patriot 2.0. They said it'll take a couple weeks or whatever. So hopefully it comes to an end as quickly as possible. And we get some type of agreement, some type of relationship. But I don't think that's what's happening. I'm worried the country's falling apart, to be frank. I'm worried that like this is the recipe for disillusion. This country's falling apart once, nearly again. So it fell apart due to the slavery thing, which was worth falling apart over because slavery it's not a concept that can coexist with a Republican government. So if you want to keep enslaving people, you're going to have to fight us about it. Okay. So the kind of civil rights almost disintegrating the country. Once again, can't violate people's civil rights. Just not going to work. We're going to have to fight about it. So the federal government is going to have to come see the governor of Alabama about it. No way around it. It won't work with our setup, frankly. It's not something that can coexist. Here again, I'm of the mind that allowing people to exist in the country without legal status can't coexist with Republican government. We just can't have it. And so we're back at that place, but the people that think that we can aren't coming off the position, much like the last several times the country nearly fell apart. And I'm worried that this time, I'm worried, but hey, let's stay hopeful. And even those that disagree with me, hopefully we can come to some type of consensus as citizens, that we can advance to our representatives that will allow the temperature to turn down somewhat. And let's see what we got. Finally, Philadelphia, some interesting stuff going on in Philly. We've been following the public transportation situation. SEPTA cuts will be reversed next week following PennDOT approval. What does that mean? That's very specific. SEPTA says full services will resume next week following a one-time $394 million infusion from the state that will allow the public transit agency to reverse 20% cuts imposed in late August. Sorry about that, guys. Governor Josh Shapiro's administration on Monday approved allowing SEPTA to spend state allocated funds for capital projects on operating expenses over the next 2 years. In a letter sent on Monday, State Department of Transportation Secretary Mike Carroll agreed to transfer the funds, a move that SEPTA formally requested last week. So it appears that money that was supposed to be used for kind of infrastructure projects can be used to subsidize expenses. Because what SEPTA was threatening, because they're having a fiscal crisis, was we're just going to cut services. It's not going to be no buses. In Philly, you got to walk. And we, at least, us here at Mituye, we found that really problematic. We're huge advocates of public transportation. The public good. I think that's a quintessential element in the Republican cause. If we're going to have a republic, we're going to have citizens, the public good, right? We need clean air, we need clean water, we need good transportation, good trains, buses, that's non-negotiable. And we have to figure out how to responsibly fund that. We have to find the money for that. Public schools, public roads, what else are we doing? If we have any resources, is there a way to spend them such that the common good is advanced? So we've been following this here for a while. This obviously is a band-aid, right? That we're going to kind of use money we otherwise should have spent on maintaining the system to keep the thing open, because it's well, how are we going to maintain the system? Isn't this going, lead to a series of other problems? Duh. I mean, kind of obviously in that way, right? This isn't a long-term fix. This is an emergency stopgap. Okay, well, here's some money to keep the buses open. They're still going to have to hike the rates for using the transit service 21%. And again, in an environment where things are inflating, where people are very much struggling, unemployment has crept up. When you're black, if you're black, is creeping up rapidly. It's 7% or something. People are running out of funds. Credit card usage is hitting highs, and things are getting tight. So to raise the fare is going to be tough on people. That's already bad, in my opinion. So this is not a sustainable fix, but I'm happy to see it treated as the emergency that it is. I was worried that they would be yeah, well, I mean, whatever. The services are just reduced. Where there was 4 buses every 2 hours, there's now 1, maybe. That's not a reasonable solution. So I'm happy to see here that SEPTA is getting some support from the state government. I'm saddened to see the state of public transportation in this country be in such peril. In the newsletter, we've covered some issues in Seattle recently. They had a $30 billion shortfall on some trains they were building. Denver is really struggling. All of the major cities are really, really struggling with public transit. So maybe it's a collective effort. Like we collectively need to rethink how we do local transit, because it's super necessary. Oh, I did the wrong thing here. I guess I just have to live with the fact that I covered SEPTA instead of New York. Perhaps I don't even have it pulled up. So my apologies for having the wrong caption underneath this portion of the video. There was another story I was considering covering in the video edition, which is that some lobbyists in New York, there's been a fighting over who has the authority to control development in New York City. Should it be the mayor? Should it be the council in terms of approval? The mayor seems to want to reestablish the arrangements such that there's a clearing of the red tape and that unelected board will have the authority to approve things, making it streamlined and easier for people to develop, as opposed to going through the council where you have to curry the favor, you have to win over, convince the council as this is in the best interest of their constituents. But they're fighting about that, and some lobbyists have thrown some money into the ring in favor of the unelected board. Because if I'm a developer, my say would be to make it as easy on myself as possible. The question that I thought that provoked was one about money in politics, right? Like, what does it actually look like? We not always, but often talk about it in the abstract. Well, what's actually happening with the money in politics? And secondarily, I thought it was just an interesting question of land use. Like, are we comfortable with that? And does speech can money count as speech? Like, do we stop people from, like, if they have a political agenda, I can say that, right? Like I get on here and I say my political opinion all the time, which is right and good, we would say. If I had money, lots of money, millions of dollars, why can't I do the same thing with my money? Well, people will argue that it causes problems. And some people, including the Supreme Court, says you can. So I thought that was an interesting element in that discussion. But that's where the mistake came from in terms of me covering this SEPTA story and it saying lobbyists will use $3 million to weigh in on New York City development. Thank you for bearing with me as I get better at this and work out these types of kinks. As always, this program is this program. Let's talk like I'm NPR. The reason this exists is because we think there is an ideal kind of way of engaging in citizenship, and it requires being informed. My commentary is not to tell you what to think. I really don't want to be authoritative. What I want to be is provocative. I want you to respond. Here's the news, right? Here's what's happening. Here's what I make of it, and what do you make of it, and how can we collectively, find mechanisms to, one, square our differences, and two, kind of get the problem at least addressed, even if we disagree in the effort at the solution. So that's what this is for. Sign up to the Substack, like, subscribe, share. Please, we gotta grow. So I need to invite as many participants, consumers, subscribers, community members as possible. So y'all have a good day. I hopefully will see you tomorrow. Again, be harder to conquer. That's the mission here. Stay out of trouble, man.